The Persian Gulf War, also known as Operation Desert Storm, stands as one of the most decisive and swift military campaigns in modern history. It was a conflict driven by geopolitical tension, oil interests, and a desire to reshape global power dynamics in the post-Cold War era. The roots of the war can be traced back to August 2nd, 1990, when Iraq, under the command of President Saddam Hussein, launched a surprise invasion of Kuwait. This act of aggression shocked the world, triggering a powerful international response led by the United States and its coalition allies. Kuwait, a small but oil-rich nation, was overwhelmed in a matter of hours as Iraqi forces stormed its borders, seizing control of key cities and strategic oil reserves. Saddam Hussein justified the invasion by claiming historical territorial disputes and accusing Kuwait of oil overproduction that harmed Iraq's economy. However, the real motivation was Iraq's crippling debt from the Iran-Iraq War and its ambition to control a significant portion of the world's oil supply. The global response was swift and resolute. The United Nations condemned Iraq's actions and imposed severe economic sanctions. U.S. President George H.W. Bush, determined to prevent Iraq from dominating the oil-rich Persian Gulf, spearheaded the formation of a vast international military coalition. The alliance included more than 30 nations, with significant contributions from the United Kingdom, Saudi Arabia, and France. Diplomacy failed as Saddam Hussein refused to withdraw from Kuwait, setting the stage for one of the most complex military operations in modern warfare. The coalition's strategy was clear: free Kuwait, cripple Iraq's military, and prevent future threats to regional stability. As military forces gathered in Saudi Arabia, the operation took on a massive scale, combining ground troops, naval fleets, and the most advanced air power ever deployed in a single conflict. The buildup, known as Operation Desert Shield, was a display of overwhelming force designed to deter further Iraqi aggression while preparing for an inevitable military confrontation. The Persian Gulf War was a complex geopolitical conflict driven by a combination of historical rivalries, economic struggles, and power ambitions. As Iraq emerged from the long and costly Iran-Iraq War in the late 1980s, it faced a dire economic crisis. The war had left the country deeply in debt, particularly to neighboring Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Iraq owed approximately $14 billion to Kuwait, which it could not repay due to its shattered economy and collapsing oil revenue. This financial pressure intensified Saddam Hussein's ambitions, pushing him toward a drastic solution: the invasion of Kuwait. He believed that by seizing Kuwait's vast oil reserves, Iraq could alleviate its economic burdens and assert dominance in the Persian Gulf region. Tensions between Iraq and Kuwait were not new. Historical disputes over borders and oil production had strained their relationship for decades. Saddam Hussein accused Kuwait of slant drilling into Iraqi oil fields near the disputed Rumaila oil reserve, effectively stealing Iraqi oil. He also alleged that Kuwait's overproduction of oil was driving global prices down, further crippling Iraq's economy. Despite diplomatic efforts and regional talks mediated by the Arab League, Iraq's demands went unmet, and the situation escalated rapidly. Saddam's decision to invade Kuwait was also fueled by a broader ambition to reshape the Middle East's power structure. He envisioned Iraq as the dominant military and economic power in the Arab world, capable of challenging Western influence in the region. He believed that controlling Kuwait's oil reserves would provide him with leverage over the global oil market, giving Iraq unprecedented geopolitical power. Additionally, Saddam sought to position himself as a defender of the Arab world against perceived Western imperialism, hoping to rally support from other Arab nations. On August 2nd, 1990, Iraq launched a full-scale invasion of Kuwait with lightning speed and overwhelming force. Within hours, Iraqi forces captured Kuwait City, encountering minimal resistance from the outnumbered and ill-equipped Kuwaiti military. Iraq's army, one of the largest in the world at the time, had extensive combat experience from the Iran-Iraq War, making the invasion a swift and brutal operation. The world watched in shock as images of Iraqi tanks rolling through Kuwait streets and terrified civilians fleeing their homes flooded the media. Saddam Hussein declared Kuwait to be Iraq's 19th province, effectively erasing its sovereignty. He installed a puppet government while looting Kuwait's wealth, seizing its oil fields and taking thousands of Kuwaiti civilians as hostages. The global response was swift and decisive. The United Nations condemned Iraq's invasion, issuing a series of resolutions demanding Iraq's immediate withdrawal from Kuwait. Economic sanctions were imposed, freezing Iraqi assets and restricting its trade. The international community recognized that allowing Iraq's occupation of Kuwait to stand would set a dangerous precedent for global security and energy stability. U.S. President George H.W. Bush emerged as a key leader in organizing a global response. Determined to protect U.S. interests in the Persian Gulf, particularly its access to vital oil supplies, Bush declared that Iraq's invasion would not stand. The U.S. launched Operation Desert Shield, a massive military deployment aimed at defending Saudi Arabia from a potential Iraqi invasion and preparing for the liberation of Kuwait. This marked one of the largest military mobilizations since World War II, involving hundreds of thousands of troops from more than 30 nations. The international coalition against Iraq was unprecedented in its scale and diversity. Nations from across the globe, including major Western powers like the United Kingdom and France, as well as Arab nations like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Syria, joined the alliance. Even historically neutral countries such as Germany and Japan provided financial and logistical support. The coalition's formation demonstrated a rare moment of global unity against a clear act of aggression. As coalition forces gathered in Saudi Arabia, diplomatic efforts to resolve the crisis intensified. The United Nations issued Resolution 678, giving Iraq a deadline of January 15, 1991, to withdraw from Kuwait or face military action. Despite mounting international pressure, Saddam Hussein remained defiant, refusing to retreat. He miscalculated the determination of the global coalition, believing that internal divisions among Western and Arab nations would prevent military action. He also hoped that the world's reliance on Middle Eastern oil would force countries to negotiate rather than go to war. Meanwhile, Iraq fortified its military positions in Kuwait, digging trenches, planting landmines, and deploying tens of thousands of troops along the Kuwaiti-Saudi border. Saddam's strategy was to create a defensive barrier that would make any coalition ground assault costly and prolonged. He also placed Scud missile launchers in strategic locations, capable of striking Israel and Saudi Arabia, aiming to provoke retaliation from Israel and fracture the fragile coalition. As the world counted down to the January 15th deadline, the Persian Gulf region became a powder keg on the brink of war. The coalition's military buildup, known as Operation Desert Shield, was an overwhelming show of force designed to deter further Iraqi aggression while preparing for combat. State-of-the-art weaponry, advanced fighter jets, and the latest military technology were deployed in massive numbers, creating a formidable military presence in the Gulf. On January 12, 1991, the U.S. Congress authorized the use of military force against Iraq, signaling that war was imminent. The world held its breath as the deadline passed without any sign of Iraqi withdrawal. The stage was set for a military conflict that would reshape the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East and redefine modern warfare. The coalition's resolve was clear: liberate Kuwait, destroy Iraq's military capabilities, and restore stability to the Persian Gulf. The countdown to Operation Desert Storm had begun. The military campaign that would become Operation Desert Storm officially began on January 17, 1991. In the dead of night, the skies over Baghdad lit up with explosions as coalition forces launched a massive airstrike campaign. The aerial assault was unprecedented in its intensity, precision, and coordination. Coalition bombers targeted Iraqi military installations, communication networks, air defenses, and supply lines with surgical accuracy, crippling Iraq's ability to wage war. Smart bombs, cruise missiles, and stealth aircraft like the F-117 Nighthawk played pivotal roles in ensuring maximum impact with minimal collateral damage. The air campaign lasted 42 days, becoming the longest sustained air assault in modern military history. Iraq's forces, despite being one of the largest standing armies in the world, were overwhelmed by the coalition's superior technology, training, and strategy. Iraq's attempts to retaliate were met with mixed results. Saddam Hussein ordered Scud missile strikes against Israel and Saudi Arabia, hoping to fracture the coalition by dragging Israel into the conflict. However, the U.S. deployed Patriot missile systems that intercepted many of the Scuds, minimizing damage and preserving the fragile alliance. Meanwhile, Iraqi forces set fire to hundreds of Kuwaiti oil wells, creating an environmental catastrophe and a smokescreen intended to hinder coalition air operations. Despite these desperate measures, Iraq's military was crumbling under relentless coalition attacks. The coalition's air superiority neutralized Iraqi tanks, artillery, and infantry units long before they could engage in meaningful combat. Morale among Iraqi troops plummeted, and thousands surrendered as conditions on the ground deteriorated. After weeks of continuous bombing, the coalition launched its ground offensive on February 24, 1991, with stunning speed and effectiveness. American, British, and Arab forces swept into Kuwait and southern Iraq with overwhelming firepower and precise coordination. U.S. Marines spearheaded the liberation of Kuwait City, encountering only sporadic resistance. The Iraqi military, battered by weeks of bombing and crippled by logistical failures, offered little organized defense. Simultaneously, coalition forces launched a massive flanking maneuver deep into Iraq, cutting off retreating Iraqi divisions and destroying key military units. This bold strategy, known as the left hook, was a masterstroke of modern military tactics, catching Iraqi forces by surprise and accelerating the war's conclusion. The air campaign of Operation Desert Storm, launched on January 17, 1991, marked the beginning of one of the most intense and technologically advanced military operations in history. The coalition strategy focused on achieving air superiority while crippling Iraq's military infrastructure with precision airstrikes. This campaign was built on the premise of shock and awe, using overwhelming force to paralyze Iraqi defenses and command structures before any ground offensive could be launched. The initial air assault targeted key military installations, including communication centers, airfields, radar stations, and missile launch sites. The objective was clear: to disrupt Iraq's ability to coordinate its forces and respond effectively to coalition attacks. The coalition's air campaign was a masterclass in modern warfare. Over 2,000 sorties were flown on the first day alone, with aircraft from multiple nations coordinating in an unprecedented display of military cooperation. American B-52 bombers, F-117 stealth fighters, and F-15 Eagles played critical roles, while British Tornado jets and Saudi F-5s added to the relentless barrage. Advanced precision-guided munitions, including laser-guided bombs and Tomahawk cruise missiles, allowed for pinpoint strikes on high-value targets. These technological marvels reduced collateral damage while maximizing military effectiveness. One of the defining features of the air campaign was the use of stealth technology. The F-117 Nighthawk, a radar-evading stealth fighter, carried out some of the most dangerous missions, striking heavily defended targets in Baghdad, including Saddam Hussein's presidential palaces and key military headquarters. The F-117's success demonstrated the potential of stealth technology and revolutionized air combat strategy. Cruise missiles launched from U.S. Navy ships in the Persian Gulf and Red Sea further expanded the reach of the air campaign, striking deep into Iraqi territory with devastating accuracy. Iraq's air defenses, while extensive, proved ineffective against the coalition's overwhelming air power. Soviet-made surface-to-air missile, SAM, systems and anti-aircraft guns fired continuously but were no match for the coalition's superior tactics and advanced electronic warfare systems. American EA-6B Prowlers and British EW Tornadoes disrupted Iraqi radar and communication networks, rendering much of Iraq's air defense grid useless. Despite Saddam Hussein's boasts of having an impenetrable defense system, the coalition achieved air superiority within days. Iraq's attempts to retaliate were aggressive but ultimately futile. Saddam Hussein ordered Scud missile strikes against Israel and Saudi Arabia, aiming to widen the conflict and provoke an Israeli response. His goal was to fracture the U.S.-led coalition by drawing Israel into the war, knowing that many Arab states in the coalition might withdraw if Israel became directly involved. However, diplomatic efforts and military countermeasures prevented this outcome. Israel, under intense U.S. pressure, refrained from retaliating, preserving the coalition's fragile unity. Meanwhile, U.S. Patriot missile batteries intercepted several incoming Scuds, earning a reputation as a groundbreaking missile defense system despite its mixed success rate. Iraq's Scud attacks caused significant psychological fear but inflicted relatively limited physical damage. However, the environmental damage caused by Iraq's deliberate sabotage of Kuwait's oil fields was far more devastating. In a desperate bid to create a defensive barrier and disrupt coalition operations, Iraqi forces set fire to over 600 oil wells, creating a thick, toxic cloud that darkened the skies over Kuwait and the Persian Gulf. The resulting environmental disaster was unprecedented, causing long-term ecological damage and complicating coalition air operations by reducing visibility. As the air campaign progressed, the coalition systematically dismantled Iraq's military capabilities. Airstrikes targeted supply depots, ammunition storage facilities, and transportation routes, cutting off Iraqi forces from vital resources. Major Iraqi military bases, including those housing the elite Republican Guard, were heavily bombed, weakening Iraq's ability to defend Kuwait. Iraqi ground forces, already suffering from low morale due to the relentless bombing, faced a growing sense of isolation and inevitable defeat. One of the most significant targets of the air campaign was Iraq's nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons facilities. Intelligence reports suggested that Iraq was actively pursuing weapons of mass destruction, WMDs, raising concerns about the possibility of chemical warfare. Coalition forces launched preemptive strikes on suspected WMD sites, including chemical weapons storage depots and research centers. These operations were aimed at neutralizing the threat of chemical attacks on coalition troops or civilian populations. The coalition's air strategy also emphasized psychological warfare. Radio broadcasts, leaflet drops, and information campaigns urged Iraqi soldiers to surrender, promising fair treatment under international law. These psychological tactics played a crucial role in undermining Iraqi morale, leading to mass desertions and widespread surrender during the later ground campaign. By the time the air campaign entered its final weeks, Iraq's military infrastructure was in ruins, and its capacity to wage war had been effectively neutralized. The sheer scale and effectiveness of the air campaign shocked military analysts worldwide. It demonstrated the power of modern air warfare, where technology, precision, and coordination could render even the most formidable military forces powerless. The coalition's success in the air set the stage for the ground offensive, which would ultimately liberate Kuwait in just 100 hours. Operation Desert Storm became a defining moment in military history, reshaping global perceptions of modern warfare and solidifying the U.S.'s status as the world's dominant military power. The ground war lasted only 100 hours, making Operation Desert Storm one of the shortest and most decisive military campaigns in history. By February 28, 1991, President George H.W. Bush announced a ceasefire, declaring that Kuwait had been liberated and Iraq's military capabilities severely diminished. The rapid and overwhelming success of the coalition was attributed to superior technology, meticulous planning, and relentless air superiority. The war demonstrated the effectiveness of modern precision warfare, where superior intelligence, logistics, and technological dominance could outmatch even the largest standing armies. However, the victory came with complex geopolitical consequences. While Iraq's military infrastructure was decimated, Saddam Hussein remained in power as the coalition's mandate was limited to liberating Kuwait, not overthrowing the Iraqi government. This decision sparked controversy, as many believed removing Saddam would prevent future conflicts. In the years that followed, Iraq faced harsh UN sanctions, international isolation, and internal unrest, setting the stage for future military interventions, including the Iraq War in 2003. The environmental impact of the war was catastrophic. Iraqi forces set fire to over 600 Kuwaiti oil wells, causing an environmental disaster of unprecedented scale. Thick, toxic smoke clouds darkened the skies, blocking out the sun and creating hazardous living conditions for months. Additionally, the Persian Gulf was polluted by massive oil spills deliberately released by Iraqi forces in an attempt to disrupt coalition naval operations. These environmental consequences left a lasting scar on the region and served as a grim reminder of the human and ecological cost of war. The Persian Gulf War also reshaped global military doctrine and modern warfare tactics. It showcased the power of international coalitions, precision-guided weaponry, and real-time battlefield surveillance. The conflict was one of the first wars broadcast live on television, bringing the brutality of combat into homes worldwide and changing the public's perception of war. The technological triumphs of Operation Desert Storm revolutionized modern military strategy, solidifying the U.S.'s role as the dominant global military power in the post-Cold War world. Despite its brevity, the war had profound long-term implications. The Middle East remained a volatile and unstable region, with Iraq emerging from the conflict weakened, but still a significant regional power under Saddam Hussein's rule. The war also cemented U.S. influence in the Gulf region, securing strategic alliances and ensuring the free flow of oil, a critical resource in the global economy. Operation Desert Storm became a defining moment in military history, proving that wars could be fought swiftly and decisively, though at a great human and environmental cost. The legacy of the Persian Gulf War endures as both a military triumph and a cautionary tale about the complexities of modern warfare. The ground offensive of Operation Desert Storm, launched on February 24, 1991, marked the final phase of the Persian Gulf War and demonstrated the power of modern military strategy, precision warfare, and coalition unity. The campaign's success lay in its meticulously planned execution, which combined overwhelming firepower with rapid maneuvering that took the Iraqi military by surprise. After 6 weeks of relentless airstrikes that had shattered Iraq's military infrastructure, the coalition was ready to strike on the ground and liberate Kuwait from Iraqi occupation. What followed was one of the swiftest and most decisive ground campaigns in military history. The coalition's ground forces consisted of over 500,000 troops from more than 30 countries, including the US, the UK, Saudi Arabia, France, and Egypt. General Norman Schwarzkopf, the coalition's commander, implemented a bold and unexpected strategy known as the left hook. This maneuver involved a massive flanking operation that bypassed Iraq's heavily defended front lines in Kuwait and struck deep into southern Iraq. The goal was to cut off Iraqi supply lines, surround their forces, and prevent any organized retreat. This strategy, kept secret until the last moment, played a decisive role in the coalition's overwhelming success. The ground assault began with U.S. Marines launching a frontal attack into Kuwait from the east. This assault was a deliberate diversion designed to draw Iraqi forces toward the Kuwaiti coast, convincing them that the main invasion would come from that direction. Meanwhile, coalition armored divisions, led by the U.S. Army's 7th Corps and British 1st Armored Division, executed the left hook maneuver. These forces advanced hundreds of miles across the Iraqi desert in record time, encountering minimal resistance as Iraqi troops were unprepared for such a large-scale encirclement. Iraqi forces, already weakened by the air campaign, were further crippled by the coalition's superior technology and coordination. U.S. M1 Abrams tanks, equipped with advanced targeting systems and heavy armor, dominated the battlefield, destroying entire Iraqi armored divisions with stunning efficiency. The Iraqi military's aging Soviet-era T-72 tanks were no match for the coalition's state-of-the-art weaponry.